thank you so much for this time today, Brendon.
So
So
welcome.
let's just hear a little bit about you. Why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners, please?
Okay, so I spent most of my life in Australia, and I grew up in a very interesting family. It was very unstable, I would say, and didn't we had a lot of abuse. Me and my two sisters, I grew up with one younger sister and one older sister, and so there was a lot of abuse, but there was also it was just an interesting family dynamics, but also so I lived in Australia and I didn't really spend that much time with my father, but his point of view was if you're going to be a man, you got to do X, Y, and Z. You got to be rough and tough and you got to get a trade and you got to basically, he had this formula for what I should be. And for a lot of it, I tried to follow it. I was one of those kids who really wanted to be loved. And so I tried to do those things for other people, but in doing so, I really eliminated a lot of myself growing up. So by the time I got to late teenage years, I'd already started with the drinking and drugs and different things like that. But I got myself into a relationship. I got myself a trade in construction work. And I was on my road to becoming this image of self, becoming a man. Yeah. And by the time I got to, so I had my son when I was 24. And by the time I got to 28, 29, I was basically at the end of my road. I just was ready to give up and I couldn't find joy. I couldn't find any ease in my life. I didn't want to get up in the morning at all. And I remember there was one day where I would have been 29. My son he was 4 years old at the time, and I was sharing a bedroom at my mother's house. I just left his mother. And so I'm sharing this tiny little bedroom with this kid, and I was just waking up miserable. And I just put a shout out to, I'd never done religious stuff. I'd done some spiritual things, but I basically was just like, whatever is out there right now, I need help because I'm done. I've had enough. If this is life, I want out. And it was the next day, I found this little ad in the newspaper that said, all of life comes to me with ease, joy, and glory. Call Mel. And I was like, what? But it stood out. It was this tiny little ad. And I was like, and I called this girl and she was like, I do this thing called the Access Consciousness bars. And she was just as nervous as I was because she'd just put this ad in the newspaper. And she was like, look, it's this technique that basically is about erasing all of the thoughts, the beliefs, the ideas out of your world so that you can have a lot more choice. And I was like, all right, when can I get a session? And I went and saw this girl and it was an hour and a half session. And I laid down on this massage table so she could do it. And I sobbed uncontrollably for an hour and a half. And it was just like everything started just coming out of me. Everything that was just that I'd buried myself under just started coming out. And after that session was the first time since I was tiny that I had any sense of me. And that was the beginning of something different for me.
Wow. So it sounds like you got back in touch with who you really were.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe it was the first time anyone had really listened to you and
That's
how you
true
felt
too.
about things. Yeah.
And the other thing too, it was the first time that someone truly just desired to contribute to me with nothing in return. I didn't have to do anything. And I think for a lot of us, we learn this transactional reality as if that's receiving.
Yeah. And what happened after that?
So after that, I started doing some seminars with Access Consciousness, and my life started changing quickly. And when I started working with this company, and then a few years down the track, I became a facilitator. But for me, the one thing that hung in there, my one back door that I kept in place was alcohol.
Yeah.
You know,
I was
so
going
it
to ask
was,
you if you were still using during all this transformation, but I guess
yeah,
yes. Yeah.
Yep. Because
It's
as
it's
soon as,
often it's often the last thing that we let go, isn't it? Even though we start changing our lives in all sorts of ways. I know
yeah,
I was one as well. So many women, for example, that do the exercise, they eat organic food, they do all this healthy stuff, and then they drink a bottle of wine every night. It's like the last thing that we can bear to let go because we can't imagine our life without it.
yeah, and I couldn't. And it's funny you say that too, because it's like in the years where it was starting to really progress with the alcohol, it's like I would do a cleanse for 2 or 3 days just to justify why I could start drinking again. But for me, I didn't want to let go of the escape
Yeah.
because it's like you work on yourself, you do this. See, for most of us, we have a desire to grow. So with that in place, it's not like that's still not occurring, but it's like you grow too much in one moment and things become uncomfortable. You've still
Yeah.
got that back door in place.
Yeah, oh, that's a very good description of it. The back door, I heard someone describe it as the easy button the other day. She said every
Yeah,
time she felt angsty, she had to press the easy button and have a drink. Because
true.
we're not good at, we have to learn to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, don't we? I think when
Yeah,
we give up drinking.
yeah. And I think for a lot of us, we live in a world where it's all about instant gratification. It's
Yeah,
all
of
about
course.
escape. And it's about how do I feel better? So we
Yeah,
put a lot of
quickly.
yeah, how do I feel better quickly?
Yeah,
And so we put a lot of energy into the way that we feel based on we use our feelings to determine what we can create, but it doesn't necessarily give you any freedom because you're only as free as what you can feel. So
mm,
for me, I was just, it wasn't until recently when I really started this journey of sobriety where I'm beginning to finally in my world have a sense of freedom.
mm. Yeah, it is freedom. I agree. Over the years, did you try and cut down or
Yeah.
set rules about your drinking like most of
you
us did?
I tried everything. And especially when I remember going to the doctors in Australia, probably must have been 6 or 7 years ago. And I was drinking heavily at the time. And I got back from this trip from Costa Rica and I was ill. And this is when my body had really started not coping well with it. And I went and saw the doctor and they did these liver tests and stuff. And they were like, you need to stop drinking. So I was like, okay, so I tried like I'll do one beer a day and one beer and a glass of wine. But what I didn't realize at the time is I'm an alcoholic. I have an
Sure.
allergy to alcohol. So as soon as I put one drink in my body, it sets off this chain of
Mm,
cravings that is unmanageable. And so I could do that for a week until one would turn to
yeah.
two and two would turn to 10 and
Yeah.
10 would turn to the
Yeah.
never-ending cycle.
We don't have an off switch basically, do we? Once we
No.
start, that's it.
Yeah, once we start, that's it. They have this
Yeah.
saying in AA, in Alcoholics Anonymous, that for an alcoholic, it's one drink is too many and 100's never enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. What do we say? If you can't have one, have none.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
so did you have a rock bottom or was it just constant? You knew you had to make a change and you finally got to it. What was the
No,
trigger for you changing?
I, I had a glorious rock bottom. I
Oh,
had a
go on
rock
then.
bottom to end all rock bottoms. So it was probably 3.5 years ago that it started becoming obvious in my life externally. Like people started really, you got a problem. And I still didn't want to look at it. I remember the first time of even contemplating no alcohol for the rest of my life, and it was terrifying. But it was terrifying that it was terrifying to me to not have the back door, to actually have
Yeah.
to show up in my life.
Yeah.
And so I remember the first AA meeting I went to, that would have been then. I had 6 beers before I went there and I wasn't taking it serious. For me, uh, 2.5 years ago, I ended up after trying to quit on my own. I could quit for 3 weeks and then it would start. And then I'd quit for 2 weeks and then it would start. And then I'd quit for a month, then it would start. It was just this endless cycle. And I was in Italy doing some business and stuff, and it began. And I ended up in a rehab clinic in Italy. That could have been my rock bottom, but it wasn't. I wasn't done yet. So I did sober after that. And then the rock bottom came. And I didn't even see it coming. That was the thing that was interesting to me, is it was somewhere energetically in my world. I get that it was coming, it was planned out. Like, it did have an awareness of it, but cognitively it wasn't a step by step, oh, I'm going to do this. It was just, it was ready to come. And so this was 16 months ago, and basically had that first drink, and then that was it. I drank for 12 days, much of which I don't remember.
No, of
And
course you don't.
and coming out of it, basically I destroyed my career, I destroyed my relationships, my friendships. I just lost everything. And within a day,
Mm,
within so quickly. And that was when I for me, I really looked at it and went, okay, do I actually want to be here?
yeah. Yeah, it
You know,
brings you that low, certainly.
yeah.
And what was your
And
conclusion? Obviously, that you would stick around because you're there now.
yeah, I would say that took me probably a few months to get to that, because I was getting sober, but it was not easy at all. Those first few months for me was, and I know for anyone listening who's been on this path knows this. And so I wrestled with whether I desired to actually live, whether I desired to show up, whether I desired to
Mm,
actually know what was true for me and actually create my life. Because, see, for me, just having a life was never going to be enough.
yeah,
If that was my target, then I'm out of here. If I can't live, then that's what I had to shoot for, and live, but also who I am.
yeah,
I think that's for a lot of us, is we go through all that shame and all that self hatred, that self abuse, and it's like that part for me was the part I just desired desperately to get away from
yeah,
my whole life. So yeah, it took me, it's been hard work, but it's probably only been the last maybe 6 months that I've started really growing into something different.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Those first few months, I so identify with what you're saying. It's really difficult for a start, and you just can't imagine that your life is going to get better because you're still fighting this demon, and it's really hard work. But as you
Yeah.
say, eventually, if you keep at it, you come into a different place, and then your
Well,
life starts changing. It's for me, it's been in two bits. First of all, I had to do the stop drinking bit, which took 6 months, and then I had to create a life for myself, a
yeah.
life that I enjoyed. And when in early sobriety, I couldn't imagine ever enjoying my life without alcohol. I was thinking a bit like you, do I really want to be in this dark and miserable place as if this is how my life is going to be? If this is sobriety, I think you can keep it.
Yeah. Yeah. True
But
story.
gradually, things get so much better, don't they?
I get so much better. If I look back on that, to even imagine that I would be where I'm at now would just have been a beyond. It would have just been, I couldn't have even began to get a sense of that, because once again, it's in that addictive behavior and that addictive pattern, it's looking for instant gratification. But the
Yeah,
only way you create a sustainable future and thrive in your life is by getting through all of the things that you've been trying to avoid. Like for me, I
yeah,
had to walk into some painful stuff. There was abuse from childhood, and there was different things where I was just like, just wanting to do everything I could to get away from it. But in that, and I work with a lot of people with this too, is in that we leave so much of us there.
yeah,
And in those moments where we give up, where you might be a kid and something's going on in your world and you've been diminished as a being, diminished as you, is in that moment of giving up power, when you're not willing to actually be present with that energy, is you leave you there.
yeah,
And that was for me. I remember the first few days of sobriety, and I was terrified because I knew that if this is going to stick, if I'm actually going to get through this, there's going to be some stuff that, like, even talking about it now makes me want to cry, because realizing at the time, I was like, there's going to be some stuff that I really don't want to go through again.
yeah, yeah,
But it's
yeah.
like, but that's what you got to be. That's the thing that creates the change.
And that's where the personal growth comes, doesn't it? When
True
you go
story.
through that pain, because
Yeah.
otherwise we just lose ourselves and we don't grow. Well done,
Yeah.
you. Have you been in therapy, and how have you been managing those demons?
I So I did a lot of AA in the beginning. I did 4 meetings a day for the first 3 or 4 months.
Wow.
A lot. I was just like, I'm just giving meetings, just doing all the AA stuff, and I had a sponsor and did the steps and all these different things. But now I have access consciousness and I facilitate other people, and I also use all of the tools because for me it's is vital. It's one of the without it, I don't think I'd be sober right now. So in the
No.
beginning steps for me, that was vital. But I didn't get the tools in that to create my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah, I agree with you. We work with a lot of people that have been to AA and they have got sober, some of them, or maybe they've been sober for a while and then they've relapsed. But I think you
Yeah.
end up white knuckling it. So you haven't really done the work. You need
Yep.
to do the kind of work you're talking about to really flourish and thrive. Because it's not just about not drinking this journey, is it? There's a lot more
No,
to it.
no, and it's such a tiny part of it.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
10%, we say.
yeah,
10% is not drinking, 90% is the other stuff.
yeah. You
But
know,
you
one
can't
of
do the other stuff if you're drinking, so you have to get
no,
that 10% nailed first.
yeah, that, and that's the part where I found AA vital was
Yeah,
you got
yeah,
to, that's the first step. So that thing in early sobriety for me when I was doing that thing that I do of trying to figure out how I was going to get out of this the quickest way was that doesn't work. I like the way you say it like that because it really is locking in that 10% first.
yeah,
The other 90 will come after it, but you can't have that other 90% without that first 10.
yeah. That it's almost your reward, isn't it, to for doing the hard stuff. I
Yeah,
say sometimes that I think sobriety is like a springboard for self-development, and you
yeah.
can't do the self-development without the sobriety.
Yeah, true story. Yeah, basically you don't have a future without the sobriety. If you truly have a problem, there's some
Yeah.
people that just want to cut back on drinking or maybe heavy drinkers, but there's as the alcoholic, and the
Mm,
alcoholic cannot stop.
mm, yeah.
And that's where for me step one, which is I'm powerless. I'm powerless over this and my life has become unmanageable. That to me, even today, is one of the biggest things is to recognize that's me. I take one drink, I'm gone.
Yeah. So all thoughts of moderation out of your mind. We often
Out.
get people that say, "Oh, teach me how to moderate." We say,
Yeah,
if you're here to moderate, you'll never be able to, because people that can
yeah,
moderate, they just moderate. They don't go and learn about it.
yeah,
That just comes
yeah. I think
naturally.
that's a good way of putting it. If you are able to moderate, you don't need to be asking how to moderate. That's a good way of putting it.
Exactly. Because alcohol isn't really on your radar. You just go off and do your stuff, and you might have a glass of wine here and there, but you're not going to go on a bender.
Yeah, I knew I was different from the beginning. I remember when I had my first drink, I was 14 and it was a beer. And when I was with some of my sisters, one of my older sister had some friends over, so it was older people, and we had a beer or 2 beers, and then everyone was done, and I was like, "Where's more?"
The party's just starting.
The party's just starting. But I remember, and then throughout teenage years and through my 20s, I'd be with people, and we'd have one drink, and then they'd go about their lives, and I'd be like, "What? What? Like, where's the rest of the bottle or the rest of the box?" But see, it wasn't talked about.
No, what used to fascinate me sometimes is you'd be out to dinner with a crowd of people, and I'd see some people leave wine in their glass. You know, think
I
you haven't
know.
finished.
I do the same thing. And I remember in a previous relationship that I was in where it's be drinking wine and she'd get finished, she'd have half a glass left and she'd like go to tip it in the sink and I'd just be like horrified. I'd be thinking like, what? But see, that's the thing that fascinates me about the alcoholic, but also addictive behavior in general is the amount of delusion that you function from. the separation from what's true based on the lies that you live by is just phenomenal to look at now. Like I look at even 2 years ago in my life and I was just like, man, I couldn't even see that at all. It
Yeah.
was so
Yeah.
off my radar because it didn't match the judgments that I had of myself at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we're in denial, aren't we? I used to say, but everybody drinks a lot. I'm just like
Yeah.
everybody else.
Yeah.
But everybody else didn't have a blackout at the end of the evening.
Yeah. True story. Or it's like for me, every time I drank towards the end, it was basically just gone.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk to us about what's been happening since you got sober. I saw in some of your stuff that you see now, you realize that sobriety is a gift. And I so agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
And one of the books that we love, that we read a lot in our community and recommend, is by Laura McCowan, and it's called We Are the Luckiest. And I really believe that now, because I know that if I hadn't got in this fix, which I got myself into, I wouldn't be living the life that I'm living today. And
Yeah.
I think that the regular drinkers, the ones that can have 2, 3 glasses and then leave it at that, they never actually get to explore and really deconstruct their life and build it again. So that's
Yeah.
why I see sobriety as a gift. But what's your take on that?
Me too. And for me now, it's like that took me quite a few months to, I was, one of the things that kept me looping back into it and just stuck was just the judgment. And it wasn't until I really started looking at, okay, what's the gift in this that I'm not acknowledging? I could see the strength that I was beginning to gain from it. I could begin to see the honesty with myself and others that I was beginning to gain from it. I had a conversation with a friend 2 days ago, and it was just something so small, but I ordered this gift for him. It was a phone case, and I'd done 4 of them, and the postage kept losing them, right? He finally gets it, and it's the wrong phone case. So I go to look in my phone, and I'm like thinking, oh, they screwed it up. I see that I've screwed it up. So I go to leave him, and instantaneously, the first thing that popped into my head was I can lie about it and say the phone company thing. And I was like, wow. And as soon as that popped into my head, I was like, that is the way I lived my life.
Hmm.
And I told him, I was like, you know what, I am so grateful for this because I just realized that I don't lie from instinct anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just realized that I'm honest with the people in my life. And that right there may seem small to some people, but that is huge to me.
Yeah. It's about changing our patterns, isn't it? Those patterns that
Yeah.
settled for so many years.
Yeah, I would just lie about everything. But it's so now the gift is I really enjoy looking at what contribution I can be to the world with it's man, not like addiction isn't a little rampant over the planet.
I know. I sometimes feel it's like a cult. Everybody drinking and all this marketing and all the peer pressure. And we're the ones that feel weird because we don't drink, but all we're doing is not drinking poison.
Yeah, exactly.
The whole world's been manipulated. And particularly women, actually, we've been manipulated to think that wine is glamorous and we have to have it in our life. And it's really worked. Big alcohol has done a stunning job.
Yeah. Hey, it worked for me. It did its job of escaping.
Yeah, that back
You know,
door, the easy button.
yeah, and I think it's like for each and every one of us, if we can recognize that it's not wrong. It's looking at, okay, what does it work for me? Because alcohol works for some people. I've had people that's 90 years old and they're still drinking and smoking and they're happy as Larry. They're just like, yeah, it's great. It works for them.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that should be celebrated. When it doesn't work for you, when it takes you away from who you are, that's when the work needs to start.
yeah. It takes you away from becoming the person you should be and you need to be, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, we often say connection is the opposite of addiction. You've probably heard that. But it's not just connecting with the people around you, it's connecting with yourself again, isn't it? And
Yeah.
the
Connecting with
self-discovery thing.
yourself, and also a big thing for me is connecting with the planet, connecting with the earth.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the killer things about addiction is it creates so much separation because you're in so much judgment. And each judgment that you have, every judgment that we have in our world is a destruction of us. It's like when your life is basically lived from judgment, you lose all connection to people, to you, to the world around you, to the earth. And it's for me, that's relevant. I had to really, one of the things that I did was I looked at, okay, so what's truly relevant to me and what's not relevant that I'm trying to make relevant. And I went through and I looked at different things that were truly relevant to me. Kindness is truly relevant to me. Having that connection, being in communion basically with the world around me and the planet, that's relevant. When I'm going, money's relevant. And then I look at that, I'm like, no, that's not actually relevant. I'm just trying to make it relevant. So it got me to look at different things, because another thing with me was having integrity. It was something that I was never shown to function from integrity. So for me, it was just like, say one thing, do another. Honesty with self, honesty with others. What are you talking about? No, you just say what you need to get what you want. And so that was relevant to me, to learn how to
Yeah.
be in integrity with myself and to learn how to be in integrity with others. It gives you a bit more of a sense of what's important to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And you taught somewhere about the misconceptions about happiness. Is that back to money again? The way that we're all chasing money to be happy?
Yeah, I
Or
think the misconception of happiness is that there's an outside source that can create it for you.
yeah.
And I think there is not one person on the planet who cannot relate to this, where it's, if I had the money, I'd be happy. If I had the relationship, I'd be happy. If I had the
Mm.
job, I'd be happy. But see, the only thing that we do is the detrimental thing that we do when we make something else the source for our happiness is you cannot receive happiness if it doesn't unless it comes from that source.
Mm.
So if you have money as the source for happiness, then if you have no money, you have no happiness.
Yeah.
You
And there
know,
are
rather
some
than,
miserable billionaires out there, I hear.
oh, I, money did not buy you that. I remember many years ago when I was like, if once I get to $10,000 in the bank, I know I'll have it right and I'll be happy. And I remember the day that $10,000 was finally in my bank account, I was like, nothing changed,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And I realized that it's not the money.
But in a way, society's been set up like that, hasn't it? To make us all chase the bigger job, the bigger car, because they want to sell us stuff, basically, don't they?
Yeah, they want to sell us stuff, but they also want to create the control.
Yeah. Yeah. So
It's
we
like, as
have we
long
have to
as
see through that.
yeah, we have to become more conscious and we have to become more aware. And that's the see, that was the missing element for me with the AA, with getting me sober. But it's, unless I'm creating a life with more awareness and more consciousness, that life is not expanding for me, and it's
Yeah.
not being a contribution to the world. And for a lot of us, we may not even acknowledge that, but I know for me, when I make it about my life, I am bored in a heartbeat. But when I make it something bigger, that's when I'm like, oh, there's that generative energy that I can create from, because it's not all about me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people that are addicted to alcohol, they've got really low self-esteem, and when we get sober, we can start to love ourselves again.
Yeah, yeah. I remember my girlfriend at the time, a few years ago, and she would say to me, "You're so confident," and I was like, on the inside, I was like, "Oh no,
Yeah.
that's an image. That's the total facade of confidence. I cannot tell you the turmoil that is in my world right now." And I didn't express it. I didn't let it out, and that was part of the pain that I had to be willing to go through to get to sobriety.
Yeah. So these last couple of years, talk to us about those, your sober years. So you're back doing this work that you did years ago when you were crying for an hour and a half. That one,
Yep, I am. Access consciousness. I highly
access
suggest people
consciousness.
look that up because it's huge around the world now. We're in 178 countries, I think, and there's
Wow.
thousands of facilitators, and it's a gift. It's all about the thing I love about access consciousness is it's about empowering people to know what they know. It's not, hey, here's an answer or here's some modality that you follow. It's about recognizing that the question will always empower. An answer will always disempower you. A conclusion, an answer, a judgment, any of those will disempower you. So it's about living a life from question, but it's also an acknowledgement that that each and every one of us, you as a being are whole. We're not missing parts and pieces that we have to find somewhere. So this journey to discovering who you are it's here. It's
Yeah.
an internal journey. It's not something that you're going to find in some far off cave in the middle of India. It just doesn't work that way. So it's about giving you access to the consciousness that you already are as a being. And
Yeah.
that's the thing I love about it. So yeah, I facilitate that.
Because
I
on that
promise.
kind of, sorry, on that approach, I was just thinking, because I'm a coach, and when I
Uh-huh.
coach people, I mostly just listen. And because I believe that they've got all the answers within themselves, I'm not there to fix them or tell them what to do. So it's
Yeah.
along that line, isn't it, really? A bit
Yeah.
like
And
coaching. Yeah.
yeah. Because see, the other thing is too, is if you look for an answer in somebody else, if you make somebody your guru, for example, they
Yeah.
have become the source for your life. Once again, that thing with having something else be the source for the creation of your life is you can't receive anything unless it comes from that source.
Yeah.
So this is an acknowledgement that you're the source for the creation of your life, and you do know. You as an infinite being have infinite knowing. This idea that we don't know what's true for us is bullshit.
Yeah.
We haven't been taught to
Mm.
question, because I know for me, and I think for a lot of us, it's like question was about how do I find the answer?
Yeah. Yeah. I
You know,
must say
not
that's one of my gripes about AA, because I went to AA, it didn't work for me. But I felt that they were telling me that I was broken and I had a disease, and I found it was extremely bad for my self-esteem because I was full of shame anyway. So whereas the kind of work that you do, that's far more empowering, isn't it, than telling people that there's something wrong with them because they drink too much.
yeah. And you know what? There is not one person that I have the point of view that there's something wrong with them. I and there's also one of the things in talking about seeing sobriety as a gift is there's not one thing that I can judge someone else for. I've been there and done it all. And so it's, you know what? I get the wrongness that you're going through right now, but you will get to a place if you keep moving forward that you'll come out of this. And another one of the things that we talk about with in access consciousness is what if your greatest wrongness is your greatest strongness? And
Yeah.
I heard that for years and I was like, bullshit. Like my greatest wrongness is my greatest evil. It's my greatest mistakes. It's my greatest, not what I discovered when I actually started walking through that wrongness. I was like, holy shit, I'm strong.
Yeah.
And,
And
and
we either succeed or we learn from any mistakes, I think. So we can
exactly.
grow all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a really good point is if you didn't look at anything as a mistake and looked at, okay, so what did that create? What awareness
Yeah.
can I
What did
have
that
from
teach
this?
me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you facilitate groups and do one-to-one work?
I
Talk to us
facilitate
about your
groups.
day. Yes.
I facilitate groups. I do one-on-one work as well. Actually, September is National Recovery Month, and I'm actually creating some stuff at the moment, like a video series and different things in that month. Some Facebook lives, some social lives with some different people to talk about some different stuff with mental health, with addiction, with never giving up. And my desire is to be a voice in the world with that because I've lived it. I have
Yeah.
firsthand
Of course you have.
experience. Not only
Yeah.
I'm not what I would call myself just a been a little bit addicted, and then I've done it to extremes of magnitude. I could tell people stories that would make them cringe. So but I'm coming out of being ashamed of that and seeing the gift that it can be in the world, because there's not, for a lot of us, we keep a lot of secrets, and it's the secrets that we keep that destroy us.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would like to be a voice to that, and I'd like to be a voice to that and contribute to more of that in the world, where people can come out from behind the curtain and just be like, here I am, warts and all.
Yeah, because you're so right. I don't think it was you; it was someone else I was interviewing. Came up with this statistic, which is that 90% of people who are addicted don't get help. They just keep it all to themselves and struggle on. So
Yeah,
that was an American statistic. So that's pretty sad,
I'm
isn't it?
I'm not
Somehow
surprised.
we've got to bust that shame, haven't we? That stigma, and encourage people to be open and to reach out. And the kind of work that you're doing will do that. So well done.
You know that for me, because there's also, see, for me, for many years, especially with facilitating, I had definitely had a commitment to being a savior of people. How do I save people from this? And I realized that doesn't work, because that creates a judgment of them, and that creates a judgment of me. And so now my point of view is I need to, the best of my ability, to live it and to be it in
Yeah,
totality. That's going to be the thing that, for each and every one of us, that's us being us is what creates the change in the world.
yeah,
And you have no idea how or no idea why, but it's just each and every one of us is a unique and a beautiful gift.
yeah. And once people realise that, their life comes together a little bit more. How can people contact you, Brendon?
I would highly suggest check out accessconsciousness.com, but
Right.
also you can contact me on my website, which is brendonwatt.com, and check it out. In September, like I said, I'll be doing this video series. It'll be a free video series. It's called Rise from Ashes. And
Okay, we can certainly tell our community about that. It sounds just up their street.
it's gonna be epic. I'm really looking forward to it, and just looking forward to just, yeah, getting things like that out there more in the world.
Rise from ashes. I like that. Like a phoenix.
Yeah, exactly. I'm being a phoenix in my life right now. I'm like, I thought I was going to stay a burned up pile of mess, but apparently I had different ideas.
Yeah, yeah. Who knew? Who knew?
Who
So,
knew? Now what else
uh,
is possible?
if someone's listening to this, Brendon, and they're in a mess, maybe having those kind of rock bottoms that you mentioned, what would you say to them? How can they change their lives? Where do they start? I think that's the difficult bit. When you're in it, you
Well,
just can't imagine doing anything about it.
yeah, I would say, first of all, get really present with it. Like, rather than trying to look at it as it's just this big wrongness and trying to lump everything together and make it a mess, just get really present with it and go, okay, so would I actually like to change this? And to the best of your ability, be honest with yourself, because if that's no, then you have something to work with. If you are saying yes, but it's a no, then you're lying to yourself, and you can't. The big part of this is you can't change anything you keep hidden from you. So if you go, you know what, I actually don't want to change it. That is actually a powerful start, because now we've got something to work with. Now you
Yeah,
have something to work with, and
yeah,
then you can start looking at it. But I would say reach out, find the resources that kind of make you light, the resources that you can find. And there's a lot of stuff out there. Find the help. You cannot do this on your own.